I want to do kind of an update on Gardner Minshew. A lot of people have sent me messages saying, why aren't you talking about Gardner Minshew? And then they're mad at the things I've said about Gardner Minshew and talking about how the Jaguars should draft a quarterback and this and that. And I get a lot of messages about Gardner Minshew. So I want to just share an update on how I feel about him. Going into the year 2020 this season going in, I said that the Jaguars were not going to win a lot of games this year and that Gardner Minshew would not be to blame. And I stand by that. Gardner Minshew is not the problem in Jacksonville. They're not a good team. They're a bad roster. And I have said before as well that if you put Gardner Minshew on a good football team, the New Orleans Saints or the 49ers or the Pittsburgh Steelers, like he would be very, very successful. Just imagine Gardner Minshew, a guy who's not incredibly physically gifted, but is a good decision maker, is very accurate. He is a perfect quarterback for a team like the San Francisco 49ers. And so I stand by. Gardner's a good enough quarterback that if you give him a good roster, he'll win a lot. He's a galvanizer. He's a good leader. He brings people alive around him. He's a very, I think I watched him play against the Broncos last year and lead his team to a fourth quarter comeback. And I'm like, that guy is leading people from the sideline. It matters. Who he is as a person matters. And if anybody listens to this topic and calls me a hater, I will fight you. You're just wrong. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. I went to Washington State during Gardner Minshew's senior year. I worked for Pac-12 Network, filming interviews with Gardner Minshew. I've shook his hand. I've literally met the guy. I could not be a bigger Gardner Minshew fan, actually, straight up. But it's also part of my job, to be honest. I can't just say stuff based on emotion. I have to be fair and honest and offer legitimate insight to the league. And I can't just say whatever I want to say. I want to say Gardner Minshew is the best player to ever step on an NFL field. But that wouldn't be true. And if I said stuff like that, no one would watch or listen. So I try to be fair. This year in 2020, a lot of stuff happened. I stopped playing college football, and I've watched Justin Herbert have a fantastic rookie year. Like, they're not winning a lot, but if you watch what Justin is doing on the field, like just the film and look at the throws he's making and the kind of stuff he's doing, Justin Herbert has blown me away. And I've also watched Patrick Mahomes just shred the NFL. I mean, he's the best quarterback I've ever seen by a mile. And Josh Allen is doing very, very well. And so we're seeing in the NFL that really, quite frankly, talent matters. The tall, athletic guy with a huge arm is dominating the NFL. I mean, it's true that being incredibly physically gifted matters. And I remember in the past watching guys like Jamarcus Russell's the best example I can think of. I also think of Vince Young. I think work ethic was a problem with Vince Young, but I think Vince Young, with better coaching in today's NFL, depending on his work ethic, with a good work ethic, Vince Young could have been a successful NFL quarterback. But a guy like Jamarcus Russell or Ryan Leaf, guys who are incredibly physically gifted but didn't succeed, always scared me away from really physically gifted quarterbacks. I wanted to be clear that if you're going to evaluate a quarterback, you can't only base your evaluation on measurables, physical skill set, the height, arm strength, speed, things like that. Because when it comes down to playing the quarterback position, that's not all there is. We saw Tom Brady become probably, the most successful quarterback at the minimum, definitely the most successful quarterback of all time. And he's not incredibly physically gifted. Same with Drew Brees. Drew Brees has like every NFL record, and he's got a weak arm. He's a short guy with an average arm. But he controlled what he could control, was incredibly accurate, made good decisions. And so I've had this battle going on in my head. How much does it matter what you do, your habits, your work ethic, your accuracy, your decision making, and how much does it matter how physically talented you are? Now, I mentioned I stopped playing football. I no longer play college football. And because I'm not playing, my perspective has also changed even more. And I'm probably honestly less biased about quarterbacks than I've ever been before. Because when I played quarterback, I was a short guy. I'm 5'11 and a half if I'm lucky. I'm 5'11. I have a weaker arm. I was never the big, strong, tall kid. And so I think inherently I always, whether I meant to or not, felt the need to point out people like Gardner Minshew and I'm trying to think of another example. Case Keenum's, like people who played some good football but weren't the most physically gifted. And so people like Tom Brady, I was a huge fan of Tom Brady growing up because, oh my goodness, he was not physically gifted. He was everything I was. He was a guy who won because he was smart and who was accurate and paid good attention to detail. But the NFL is changing, right? Patrick Mahomes was a guy who had a lot of problems on tape in college, but the upside was crazy. And we've seen Patrick Mahomes absolutely meet his potential. And it starts with good coaching. And then I've watched Justin Herbert, a guy who I thought had problems in college, go to the NFL, get good coaching, and looks really, really good. Now, it's 1 year. Maybe Justin Herbert suddenly changes next year. And, we saw, for example, RG3 won a Rookie of the Year one time. Like, you can have a good rookie year and then follow that up with a bad career. But my point is that more than ever, it feels like physical attributes do matter. And also more than ever, players with flaws are going to the NFL, getting good coaching, and getting better. So in the past, you saw a guy like Justin Herbert who had problems in college who would go to the NFL and fail because you were running more complicated systems and weren't getting as good at coaching adapted to their play style. In today's NFL, things have changed. You take a guy like Justin Herbert and go, what's he good at? How can we build an offense around his skill set, dumb things down, simplify things? And that's not really a credit. I mean, Justin Herbert's not being, things aren't necessarily being dumbed down, but they're fitting an offense to his skill set. That's not a dig at Justin Herbert, even at all. And so my point is that guys with flaws but great physical skill sets are dominating because they're being developed into better quarterbacks. And I look at the game from less of a player who was a short quarterback and more as a coach now. And so my long way of putting this is to say that my entire outlook on football has changed. I no longer think that you need to be just a guy with good habits. If you have bad habits, hey, do you have potential? Because as a coach, I have confidence. I can teach you how to play. So a guy like Justin Fields at Ohio State has had two really bad games this year, Northwestern and Indiana, where he was not beating the blitz with a throw. He had bad interceptions. He was throwing the ball into traffic. And as a coach, I look at that and would go, man, like, I can teach this kid how to play football. He clearly works hard. He's got a great physical skill set. And I can teach him how to read a defense. Like, I can help him with that stuff because he works hard enough to do that stuff well. And that leads me all to Gardner Minshew. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the game from a more of a coach's perspective, who would you rather work with? The guy who's 6'5" with a rocket arm who can run, or Gardner Minshew, who's an average height and has an probably below average arm strength and is not incredibly physically gifted? Who has a higher ceiling? If they make the same decisions, no matter what, Justin Herbert is always going to have a higher ceiling than a guy like Gardner Minshew. And so my whole conclusion here is to say that Gardner Minshew is fine. He's totally fine. He's a very, very solid quarterback that if you give him a great team, he can win a lot of games. I think Gardner Minshew on the 49ers, I truly believe could win a Super Bowl. Like, I'm a big fan of the guy, but I also, unbiased, he makes good decisions. He plays some good football. He's a good leader. There's good stuff about Gardner Minshew. But there's a limitation to what Gardner Minshew can do. His potential has a ceiling. He's not incredibly fast. He can extend a play a little bit. He has an average arm. He doesn't push the ball very well downfield. But he does other little stuff right. And so my whole conclusion here, again, is that Gardner has limitations. And I haven't really cooled on Gardner Minshew, but I have really changed my perspective to say, yeah, having a guy like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like these guys who are tall, physical, freaks, guys who are incredibly naturally gifted. If I'm a coach, that's who I want to work with. And I'd rather work with that guy and develop that guy than develop Gardner Minshew, who at some point is going to run into a ceiling. So it's not really that my opinion of Gardner Minshew has gotten diminished. I feel the same about Gardner Minshew, but my opinion on guys with incredible physical talent has risen. I mean, I really believe that guys like Justin Fields, who have some problems, but a lot of talent, can be developed into a good quarterback, where I think a couple of years ago, and even last year, I didn't believe in Justin Herbert because he had problems on film. And the truth is that now guys with problems on film, we saw Josh Allen had problems in college, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, these guys are getting better coaching that's adapted to their skill set, and they are succeeding in the NFL where they wouldn't have 10 years ago. And so the NFL landscape is changing, and I want to change with it. And so, again, I repeat, physical ability, arm strength, height, speed, natural talent, it does matter. And I think it matters more than ever before in the NFL.